right, strap yourselves in, because today we are diving deep into the A$AP Rocky trial.
Oh, yeah, this one had it all.
It did. And you guys sent us everything but the kitchen sink, court transcripts, news articles, video footage from the courtroom. It's insane. It's like we're jurors ourselves.
You know, it really grabbed the headlines, this one.
Big time.
And not just because of A$AP Rocky. I mean, obviously the celebrity status is a factor, but it really got people talking about some important stuff, too, like self-defense and the use of those prop weapons in entertainment.
Oh, yeah.
And also, how reliable are eyewitness accounts?
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's a real legal puzzle, isn't it? Just to catch everybody up, A$AP Rocky, the rapper, was staring down the barrel of 2 counts of felony assault with a firearm.
Heavy stuff.
Super heavy. And this all stemmed from an altercation back in 2021 with a former friend of his, A$AP Rocky.
Right.
And we're talking like a potential sentence of 24 years.
24 years, yeah. Felony assault, just so everyone's on the same page. It's not a joke. It's a serious charge.
Oh, absolutely.
In this instance, the prosecution's case was that A$AP Rocky intentionally fired a semi-automatic pistol at A$AP Rocky,
Right.
actually grazed his hand,
Wow.
and if they'd gotten a guilty verdict, well, he'd be looking at a very long time behind bars.
And they really pushed that narrative too, didn't they? Like the prosecution was, emphasizing he fled the scene, which, not a good look, right?
Doesn't exactly scream innocent.
No, it really doesn't, does it? But then the defense comes in with this whole other angle.
Yeah, they threw a curveball in there.
Yeah.
Claiming it wasn't your typical firearm at all.
Right.
It was a prop gun, the kind they use in music videos, firing blanks.
Okay.
And their argument was basically, look, using this type of prop, even if things get heated, you can't really call it a crime.
And to back that up, they had witnesses, right? Like A$AP Rocky's tour manager.
They did.
So you've got these 2 totally different stories.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is crazy, isn't it?
It is, and that's what makes this case so fascinating, because it really boils down to who do you believe?
Exactly.
Neither side actually presented the weapon.
Right.
And that surveillance footage they had, it wasn't really clear enough to prove what kind of gun it was.
So it all hinges on credibility.
It does.
Whose story is more believable? Man, that's a tough job for the jury, especially with so much at stake.
It is.
Speaking of the jury, let's actually rewind to that moment when the verdict was read. You sent us the courtroom audio. Let's have a listen. Yeah, and it paid off for him, but it makes you wonder, what went into that decision? What are those conversations like with his lawyers? I bet it was intense.
I bet. I mean, you're talking about some serious risk assessment going on there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because sometimes, even if it means you could end up with a harsher sentence, going to trial is actually the best option.
Wow.
It really is, yeah. So it's pretty fascinating to get this little peek into, how these legal teams weigh all those factors.
It really is, yeah. So we know he was found not guilty, but how did they get there? What did the evidence actually show?
Right. So remember, the prosecution, they're trying to get a conviction on these 2 counts of felony assault with a firearm, right?
Yeah.
So to do that, they've got to convince the jury, beyond reasonable doubt, that A$AP Rocky used a real gun, like intentionally, to hurt A$AP Rocky.
But the defense is saying, no, it was a prop gun. Blanks, can't cause that kind of injury.
Exactly. And that's where it gets tricky for the prosecution, because they couldn't produce the actual weapon.
Oh, wow.
And the footage, that surveillance footage, it wasn't clear enough to show what kind of gun it actually was.
So the jury's basically left to, sift through these 2 stories and decide, okay, who do we believe here?
Exactly.
And that's where this whole prop gun thing gets really interesting, legally speaking, I imagine.
Oh, yeah, for sure, because you have laws about these prop guns, especially in California where it all went down.
Right.
It's not as simple as just saying, oh, well, it was a prop, so no harm, no foul, right?
I bet there are all sorts of rules about how you have to handle them and store them and all that.
Oh, absolutely. And the prosecution probably argued that even if it was a prop, what he did still counts as assault, especially with the injury and everything.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like the jury had a lot on their plate trying to sort out the legal stuff and then weigh that against, who they believed and all that.
It sounds really complicated.
It really was. And remember, the judge, he actually praised the jury afterward, for being so careful and really looking at all the evidence.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It wasn't like they were just, starstruck or something. They really took their job seriously. In fact, you sent the audio of that, didn't you?
I did, yeah. Let's hear it.
Okay.
Wow, you can hear how much respect the judge has for them?
Yeah, I mean, he knows it was a tough case with a lot of, gray areas.
Totally.
It wasn't just about, the celebrity thing or a big spectacle. It was about real people and a serious question of law, you
Right,
know?
right. And it reminds you that the system relies on these everyday people, right?
It
Voters
does.
to make these big decisions.
Absolutely. And they did. In this case, they really stepped up. And it's a good thing to highlight, with all the talk about celebrity influence and everything.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like the judge's comments, they tell us that this jury wasn't swayed by fame or anything like that. They really focused on the evidence and the law.
And they weren't afraid to go against the grain either, right?
Yeah, I mean, they came back with a not guilty verdict, even in a high-profile case like this.
That's pretty amazing.
It is. Actually, why don't we go back to that moment when the verdict was read again?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Man, you can practically feel that tension just draining out of the room.
It's palpable, isn't it?
It is.
From looking at potentially 24 years in prison to walking free. I mean,
Life-changing.
it's huge, but as we talked about before, this verdict, it doesn't change what the alleged victim went through.
Right.
Even with the not guilty, there are always those ripples, those consequences and questions that just linger.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. In this case, it got so many people talking about all these bigger issues, too. Like, think about self-defense laws. What are the rules for using these prop weapons on movie sets or music videos? And then how do you deal with eyewitness testimony when, the evidence isn't clear-cut? It's crazy. It's like one trial became this window into all these different parts of the legal system, but also society as a whole.
It's true. And that's what makes it so thought-provoking. It's not just about the specifics of this one case. It's about what it tells us about how we, as a society, understand these issues.
Exactly. Yeah. What about you? What really sticks out to you?
Oh, man. For me, it's those conflicting narratives,
Yeah.
It's like you've got the prosecution saying, look, this was straight up violence, totally intentional. And then the defense is saying, hold on, this was just a misunderstanding with a harmless prop. How do we as a society figure out what to believe when you have these totally different versions of the truth? It's wild.
It's really hard, isn't it? It makes you think about, how do we even find truth in a courtroom? And, the power of just how we see things.
It does.
And all those biases we have, the conscious ones and the ones we don't even realize. It's hard to be totally objective.
It really is. And then on top of all that, you've got the whole celebrity factor, right?
Right.
Which totally shapes how the public sees things. It's hard to ignore, how fame might influence things. Does it affect how the media uncovers the case, how people see the defendant?
Right.
And even how a jury makes their decision. It's tough.
It really is. And I feel like, you add in this celebrity thing and it almost becomes this Rorschach test for how we view the whole justice system and celebrity culture, right?
Yeah. And even our own biases,
Totally, yeah. We all come to it with our own baggage.
It's true. And that's what makes it so interesting to unpack, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a legal case. It's this social and cultural phenomenon, It reflects back on us as a society. We can't look at it on its own. It's tied up with those bigger conversations about race and privilege and how we judge each other.
And let's not forget, before the trial even started, he had a chance to make it all go away.
He did.
A plea deal, 180 days, done. You sent us some audio from a news report about that, right?
Yeah, I did. Let's hear it.
That's a huge gamble. I mean, he could have been out in, 6 months?
Yeah.
Instead, he was potentially decades in prison.
Yeah. What do you think motivated that decision?
I don't know. It's tough to say, but it seems like, he really believed he was innocent, and he was ready to fight for that.
Yeah.
Even when, things weren't looking so good.
Absolutely. And it also makes you think about, the impact a guilty plea could have had on his career.
Oh, totally.
And his public image, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's a plea deal for a lesser charge, that stain's hard to get out,
Right. Especially when you're in the public eye.
Especially then, yeah.
And for him, it paid off. He walked out a free man. But, as we've been talking about, this case leaves us with a lot more to think about than just the verdict.
It does. It really highlights how complicated our legal system is.
Yeah.
The power of those stories we tell and how we see things. And then that celebrity factor, it's always there, right? It just keeps coming up.
Yeah.
These are all issues that go way beyond this one courtroom.
And it makes you wonder, what does this mean for him going forward?
Oh, totally.
How does something like this, a trial, no matter what the verdict is, how does it change you?
Yeah.
Your career, your creative process, how you see the world.
It's a good question. I think we'll just have to wait and see. right?
Yeah.
Will we see it in his music,
Yeah.
his message, how he presents himself, or will he try to, just brush it under the rug and move on? It's a big moment in his life, that's for sure.
For sure. And what about A$AP Rocky?
Right. Yeah.
The other person in all this. The legal stuff is done, but I imagine, like, emotionally, personally, it's not over for him.
Oh, no, not at all. And this case really shows you, that a trial, it's not just about what happens in the courtroom.
Right.
It's a reminder that these are real people, right? Their lives are changed by this whole thing, no matter what the verdict says.
Absolutely. So we've looked at the verdict, the evidence, all the legal arguments, even some of the bigger social questions it brings up.
We have.
What do we take away from all this? Like, what's the message for our listeners?
Well, I think it shows that we've got a lot more talking to do about things like self-defense and those prop weapons and how much weight we put on eyewitnesses, especially when, the physical evidence is iffy.
Yeah.
Those are questions that come up all the time, not just in this case.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, they affect the whole system.
Exactly.
And we can't forget about that celebrity factor, right?
Oh, right. Yeah, that's the elephant in the room.
It really is. We've been dancing around it this whole time. Did being famous help A$AP Rocky? I mean, it's hard to say for sure, but it's something to think about, right?
Absolutely. It gets at that fundamental question,
Yeah,
Is everyone really equal in the eyes of the law?
right.
Do money and fame, do they tip the scales? Do they change how the media tells the story?
Yeah.
How the public sees the person on trial? Even how the jury thinks about it? These are big questions.
They really are.
Way bigger than just this one trial.
It's like this case, with all its ups and downs, it's like opening this Pandora's box, right?
It is.
All these questions about the legal system, our culture, how we figure out truth, what's fair, how we judge each other. It's a lot.
It is a lot. But we've given you the facts, the expert opinions, hopefully a fresh perspective. Now it's your turn.
Yeah.
What jumped out at you? What are you still thinking about?
What made you go, wait a minute, I never thought about it like that before? That's what this is all about, giving you the info, showing you the different angles so you can keep digging.
Right, exactly.
This is The Deep Dive, signing off until our next adventure into the unknown.